Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm the Gnarly Gnome. This is Cincy Brewcast. It's the voice of Cincy Craft, and for the second week in a row, for you guys, it's all happening at the same time, same day for me. But we're back in Dayton again. Not Dayton Brewcast. It's not a joke. It just so happens to work out that way. That's where we're recording, I guess, for forever now. No, that is a joke. This is still Cincy Brewcast. This week, we're sitting at Toxic Brewing Company. I have not been here for a long time, but it's not a toxic show. We're not going to really talk too much about them. We're just going to drink their beer while we talk to you guys about another podcast, another social media channel, another voice of Cincinnati craft beer and beyond. Blake, the Brewery Explorer. I've been eager to get you on the show for a while to kind of talk about what you're doing. You've been blowing up over the last. When did you start the Instagram channel?
2021.
Yeah, so about the last 2 years, you've been kind of growing this thing and building it, and then the podcast just launched this year, and I'm excited to talk about it. First, we do have to mention what we're drinking. I already forgot the name of mine. Is it Practice Yoga? It's a beer podcast. We have to at least mention what we're drinking. Practice Yoga. It's a session IPA. Drink it real quick. What did you pick out?
The Practice Yoga as well.
What did you?
Yeah, I got the Abbey's Cure. It's a Belgian. I think it's a Weiss beer.
Right. Have you tried it yet?
I had a sip on the way over, so I didn't spill it. I thought it was very good.
What do you think? Like, what's?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Hefeweizen fan, so I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's clean and doesn't make me gag, so I'm going to keep drinking it.
Practice Yoga's okay.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of the beers that I've had there that kind of just taste old school to me. Like, it reminds me of kind of the early days of craft breweries. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. There might be something to pull from that maybe says something. But
what's your favorite beer?
My favorite beer, like in the world?
The style, yeah.
Style-wise, it depends on the day, depends on the mood, depends on where I'm at and who I'm with. But I like light, crispy boys typically. But
okay.
But that's not to say that I don't like other stuff. That
Gotcha.
tends to be what I lean towards.
Gotcha.
Introduce yourselves first, so people can hear your voices and know who's who and what you guys do. And
sure, I'll let you go first.
Make sure you get on that microphone when you talk to, please.
My name's Blake Longfellow. I run the Blake the Brewery Explorer on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, wherever you can find me. I've been doing this since 2021 and just been a fan of craft ever since, even before I was 21. My dad and uncle took me to Schlafly in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah.
So it just grasped me, and it's just something that I've continued with ever since. So
yeah, I get that. I've never actually been to the Schlafly tap room, but I had a buddy that went to school in St. Louis, and when we were there, we typically drank a lot of Schlafly. we did spend a lot of time at the other big brewery there because you could drink for free.
Yeah, I'm. My name is Noah Jones. I am a podcast producer and a friend of Blake's, and we've sort of been working on this venture together and having a lot of fun and sort of exploring the different beers and beer makers across Ohio, and it's been a lot of fun.
How did you guys get to know each other?
at Oktoberfest.
Yeah. So he just happens to be really good friends with someone that I went to college with, Eric Bergesser, who's also on our show. And we kind of hit it off. And I just felt like he had such a passion for drinking drinking craft beer, that I really felt like he was a potentially great interviewer and podcast host. And so far, so good.
Yes.
When did that conversation start about turning it into a podcast?
It was a really rapid turnaround. I think that I can't remember the day, but we also went to Dark Charge, and that was really when I told him about my idea. So when was Dark Charge at Braxton? Yeah, it was
December.
Yeah, it was definitely winter. So I guess really from then, I would say maybe 2 or 3 months later, we were doing our first interview and trying to figure out what this could potentially look like. And we, I think, just sort of almost out of pure luck, it was sort of a magical fairy tale moment. We went to the anniversary of Mad Tree, and I'm alone in line, and I am semi-blind, in which I can't see that far away from me. And where I was positioned in line, I couldn't quite read a beer on the menu that I really thought that I was going to enjoy based off of its name. And so I just sort of randomly, because I'm a relatively outgoing person, asked the person in front of me if he could read me what was in the beer that I was wanting. And he turned all the way around and said, "Oh, this beer, I don't even need to read it. I made it. I can tell you what's in it." And so from that point, once I picked my mouth up from the floor, of course, I told him that we were starting a podcast. And so we ended up interviewing him, Ryan Blevins of Mad Tree, for our first podcast. And that was
the first episode.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really ask for a bigger swing and home run for Ohio beer, for craft beer at least. It was a great success, and it was so much fun, and I think it was a really great sort of launching point.
Yeah.
What got, and this goes kind of for both of you guys, you can go back and forth or one of you at a time, however you want to do it. What got you into craft beer? What is it about craft beer that gets you excited, that kind of keeps you going with it, that makes you want to try new places? I know that's a big part of, the ideas of brewery exploring, trying new things and going new places. What is it about it?
I don't know. It's, good beer, but also the people you meet along the way. I think the friends I met out even from the 513, then I just launched the Miami Valley Craft Beer Group because I don't know why I did it, but it was just something fun to do and just trying to help growing the craft community, because I still feel like there's a lot of people that don't understand what we do, and I just try to show and try to educate people on craft, and it's just the people you meet.
But even before you launched the podcast or the Instagram channel, just from the early days of just kind of falling in love with the beer itself, what is it about craft beer that gets you excited?
I guess I just started out being with my dad, my uncle, and my cousins. It's just something we all did together, and once I stumbled upon Ohio, I didn't realize at the time, because I was learning everything out in Missouri, that I didn't realize Ohio was that big, and it's just something that kept growing, and just the different beers I've had, and it's just, I don't know, just something that something got attached, and I haven't let it go.
Right. How about with you?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a dweebish thing to say, but I just really like supporting local things, and Yuengling, Miller Lite, Budweiser aren't brewed locally, so I live in Walnut Hills, so I like drinking.
Miller kind of is.
Well, okay, but it's mostly a Milwaukee thing, I think. And so anyway, I like buying local things. So when it comes to drinking beer, I will drink craft beer that's made here. I grew up in St. Louis, so I'm very familiar with Schlafly and all of those really wonderful breweries, but I don't get to go there very much because I don't live there anymore. So I tried to find a new sort of path, which was the craft beer around me.
Right. On that same idea, when you did decide to start, the Instagram channel came first, right? Mm-hmm. What was the inspiration for that? Why did you decide to kind of start sharing it with the world?
I think it started brewing in 2020 when we couldn't go anywhere, and my worry was how many breweries are going to survive this. Right. So about I think it was January 21, I decided, hey, I'm going to just start taking pictures of breweries. It was supposed to just be pictures, and it turned into me describing the beers into that, and it just kept growing. I kept on trying little things at once, not doing everything at once. Right. Just try different things, see how things reacted, and it just took off from there.
What parts of it have you enjoyed the most so far?
Just exploring Ohio. Ohio has so many good craft beers, just not in Cincinnati or Dayton, Toledo. I just went to Cleveland a month ago. Columbus. There's so much good beer in Ohio. and I think I'm just tapped into it. And hopefully I get to go different states too, but really Ohio is what I'm focused on.
Well, I keep finding that as much as in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go take a beer trip here. I'm gonna go do this, or I'm gonna go spend a weekend in Dayton even and explore the beer scene here in Dayton. And it's like, well, I still haven't. When was the last time I went to this place or this place or this place, even in Cincinnati? Then there's this list of beers that I know are released right now that I haven't tried yet that I really want to try. And it's like there's just so much stuff in any one of these cities that it's really easy to kind of get bogged down is not the right word because that makes it sound very negative, but it's easy to spend all of your time at in one part of the beer scene instead of kind of spreading it around everything else. There's just a lot of good stuff happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think every time we go to a new every time we go to a new brewery, I always sort of discover their intent behind why they started, and I sort of fall in love with it. And I really have this new appreciation for at least 4 beers that they serve on their menu. Yeah. And it's always really interesting. For instance, we went to Crooked Handle in Dayton area last week for our podcast, and they were telling us a little bit about the reason why that the Crooked Handle is their name of their podcast, and talking a little bit about like their different beers. The peanut butter porter specifically is one of their best selling and one of their favorites, and they were also sort of talking about like how they have both of their buildings on Main Street, and so they call their Kolsch the Main Street beer, and it's just it's awesome to really get to talk to all of these really, really fantastic breweries and understand what they're all about. At the same time, they're also so accessible. And I'm sure that you feel the same way. Yeah. Doing things since 2015, I don't know that it's really a common thing for most professional people to say yes to 3 absolute amateur people at an anniversary party saying like, hey, can we talk to you for our first podcast? You have no idea who we are. And Brian was just sort of like, yeah, I love talking about beer. Yeah. It's such a unique and fantastic space to be in.
And the funny part, and funny, again, it's probably not the right word, but it is very normal in craft beer. And I think that people that don't understand the craft beer industry are often surprised by that, but like most people are willing to, if some Yahoo walks in off the street and says, hey man, I make a podcast, and he pulls out his phone even and just sets it on the table, this is how I record it, like, oh yeah, I'll sit down and I'll record a podcast. Like people are excited to share kind of the gospel of craft beer with whoever wants to hear it. Even when we started the show, I started with a couple other people, and I had been doing the blog already at that point, and the guy that I started with, he's like, how do we do this thing, this podcast thing? How do we get people to sit down and talk to us? I'm like, you just ask them. Like everybody's going to be willing to do it. And no, they won't. Nobody's going to sit down and talk to us. I'm like, oh, they will. And you can walk into any city that has craft breweries and walk into any brewery and ask them, and chances are they're excited to talk about it with somebody. And I do think that's unique to this industry.
Yeah, I mean, Blake, I don't know how many people you've asked to be on our podcast, but I can't count the number of yeses compared to the number of no's.
Right, because I had to kind of slow down for a second because of all our 3 work schedules, we can't do it every day.
Sure.
We do about 2 times. We try to do 2 times a month. And some of them we have coming up, we've made like, hey, we'll meet on a weekday because we just need to do it. So, but I've really enjoyed doing it with the guys we have. The 3 of us get along so well and have so much fun together.
Well, it's important to find people to bring into it around you that you guys can complement each other. The strengths of one person kind of balance out the weaknesses of somebody else, and you can build this team that...
First time he came to me, I thought he was trying to get it to do it by myself. I was like, you're nuts, because I don't know if I'm quite there or will ever be there to do it by myself, and I wanted to do it with people I enjoy with.
Right. Where does it go from here? Like how what is the kind of the long-term plans for the podcast, for just the Blake the Brewery Explorer world in general too?
Well, I stole the mic, so I'll hold on to it for a little bit. But I don't have all the answer to the question. At least for this podcast, we're only 4 episodes old, so we're really trying to just sort of like get out there, I think, and prove to each other even that it's worth doing for fun. And then eventually, I suppose we'd be looking for sponsors once we feel like we have a routine up. But talk to us a little bit about what Blake the Brewery Explorer's future would be.
It keeps evolving. I mean, I try different things. Sometimes it works and sometimes it don't. And, but yeah, I really just don't know what the future holds. I mean, I just keep on going with the flow, and then it seems to work, and not try to panic too much when things don't go right, because eventually I've just shown it works, and then we eventually will get it.
What does going right look like to you? Like what is kind of the overall what is the point of the
where we leave a podcast and once he gets it edited, we're like, okay, all of it went right. Okay, now we're here. Now we can start working more on our questions more, because I think our questions are evolving too, because it's kind of hard to decide what you want to ask and try not to be repetitive with them at the same time.
Right.
But one thing I really noticed I've liked talking about people with is the history. Like when we were talking to Crooked about like the history of Dayton and stuff like that, and it's something I wish we kind of kept on going with, but also at the same time I want to learn about them too, and try to get their name out.
Well, and it's it varies a lot from place to place. There's some places that you go into and first thing you start talking about, you're like, oh man, we could do an entire episode just on this one question that I just asked. And then there's other places you go and it's like you're trying to pull stuff out of them, and it's just it's very different from place to place or guest to guest.
We've definitely had a couple of both of those, but I think that it's also a learning process, because of the 3 of us, Eric, Blake, and myself, I'm the only one who has experience doing podcasts. And I also have a background as a journalist, so I also sort of just am constantly thinking of questions that really helps, I think, as opposed to people who've always just sort of wondered but never really had to think on their feet. So I think it's all a learning thing. I think that'll probably just be how it is for the first year. And I think that without a doubt, though, every one of us feel really confident in at least one thing of the podcast, and then they only get better every time because you get more comfortable.
Sure. Let's kind of talk bigger picture stuff with craft beer in general. Like, what gets you guys excited about craft beer right now, and what are some of the things that maybe you think is changing about craft beer that is not as exciting as you wish it was?
Just how places continue to open, I think, with
in a good way or in a bad way?
In a good way. I mean,
I could fall into
I forget
one
the
of those
one
categories.
that the monsters. I'm excited to see what
Wandering Monsters.
what does, and I feel like there's so many, like Dayton and above. There's still so much potential up there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't think it has really been tapped in. Like Crooked Handle just went to Piqua, and Piqua came down, handpicked them to come. Hey, we want you to be part of this project.
Right.
So. And downside, I don't really see any yet. I mean, everyone we talked to seemed optimistic, especially like Kelly and Tom Argo out of Third Eye. They're all excited about their future, and that excites me when you hear that. I know some people have some negative things on them, but I don't see too many as a problem.
Right.
Because I don't think we've hit that threshold yet.
Yeah, I don't think we're
I
close,
think some will come and go, but for the most part, I think Dayton has held its own.
You don't have any kind of negative feelings about the industry as a whole right now?
Maybe because I'm too new into it, but I really don't.
Right. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but I mean, there's coming out of the week after Craft Brewers Conference where there's still a lot of problems with people of color in this industry, with women in this industry, with like as a whole, like there's still so much space that needs covered that we're sometimes I see stuff like that and I'm like, oh God, we have so far to go. But then other times I look at it from another perspective. I'm like, we've come so far.
But I think that's kind of the same state of our country some days too, is that we're still working on stuff as a country, and I think craft beer can help with that if people just accept what's going on and accept change.
Right.
I will also say that one of the things that I found really interesting, and I probably talk about it too much on Blake the Brewery Explorer podcast, is how different breweries managed their way through the pandemic, which, according to the FDA or whoever the government agency is, we just got over. But like for who was it? It was Third Eye. They really had to sort of not rush in a negative way, but they had to really ramp up their distribution just to be able to make a profit to pay their rent on their space. And then you have other places like Warped Wing, which we have coming up, who I'm sure will have a different story to tell about how they made it through because they were so successful beforehand. But it's really impressive to see how the Cincinnati, at least for you and me, that craft brew space is really, I would imagine, getting pretty full. I mean, it seems like there's one per neighborhood, if not two. Right. And I mean, there's no doubt that Cincinnatians love beer, so they're always the more the merrier. But you got to wonder if eventually there will just be no more room for new players.
Yeah, it's you can look at other industries, and I know the fast food industry is one people want to point out sometimes of how many burger restaurants exist in the world, and as much as you would say that that industry maybe is saturated, it doesn't mean that new places aren't opening, and that like it just depends how you look at all this stuff. What about like other beverages? So we've seen kind of craft beer. If you listen to kind of the experts and the numbers and things that people are yelling from the rooftops of, craft beer is dying and people are drinking bourbon and that's all they care about anymore. Everything else is dropping. Even seltzer now, nobody gives two shits about. As from craft beer fans, like, does that kind of those kind of numbers, does that worry you about what's happening, or does it make you want to kind of expand on the whole idea into other beverages, or does that factor into the hobby at all for you?
I mean, I've always been into bourbon as well, because I think bourbon and craft beer kind of go hand in hand, especially in Ohio now with all the barrel aged stuff. Sure. They just come in hand. But I know some breweries have tried to do both. Like, I know March 1st is the biggest one out of the bunch, but I think eventually we'll start seeing more brew distills too, just trying to grab into that other world too, just to help out.
Right.
Because I think everything goes through phases, but it seems like craft has, even the numbers are low, but some of the places we go to, they're still packed. So, yeah. Like Third Eye was saying, they're packed about every week. So I think it just depends where you go.
Do you see any of that stuff kind of working its way into the Brewery Explorer kind of universe?
Maybe
Blake the Bourbon Explorer, Blake the Seltzer Explorer.
Not seltzer. I'm not a seltzer person at all. I've tried seltzer, I just can't do it.
He puts the sigh in cider.
But maybe bourbon, but I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to get this grasp before I even think about something else.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in agreement with you, Blake. I think the thing for us right now is to sort of become, it's a generous term, but we'll take it for right now, become experts in one category before even pretending to know what we're talking about in another. I think that typically listeners will know if we're sort of, just talking out of our ass about like, oh, this tastes great, you know what I mean? And so, we really just sort of want to focus on one type of alcohol before moving on to another. But I wouldn't count it out totally. If there's a market for it, then sure, why not us? You know what I mean? But especially for someone so green with this podcast, I think that it's important that we focus on understanding who we are first.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. And I think what's interesting to me is less of the excitement around other beverage spaces as it is the potential for some of those to make people better beer drinkers. I think that, if you're a beer drinker and you start getting into bourbon, it'll change the way you taste beer. The same goes for wine or for anything really. I mean, it changes the way you experience the thing that you do love. And like I try to tell people all the time not to limit themselves of what you're drinking. Like if it makes sense at the time, just try it and let yourself kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit. But I guess at the same time, if you don't like something, you don't have to drink it. Just
right.
do what you enjoy.
I don't think I'll ever get a non-alcoholic beers either. I haven't tried any yet, so.
I'm still so torn on it, and if you didn't listen to the episode a couple weeks ago, go back and listen to that one because they're fascinating to me. I still, in my head, if you could create a beer that tasted and gave me the same joy that a regular craft beer gives me, and it didn't have alcohol, it's even better than a regular beer. But I don't think that exists yet. Who knows if it ever will.
Yeah, I would say never, Blake. I think that, sometimes you got to try new things for your audience and just sort of live the Vida Loca.
Right.
Never limit yourself by saying I won't try something, but
right.
I don't think that's what you're saying. It's just
right.
I just, if you don't see, I can't anticipate that happening. I can let that go.
I mean, I've tried seltzers, like I said, but nothing ever stuck. Like, oh, this is good. Like, so.
I agree with that. I mean, there are some seltzers.
I'd rather drink a cider first before a seltzer, but.
Yeah, I get that. I think that there are some that I've tried that kind of hit exactly what I think they're shooting for, but it's never going to be my first choice over a good beer. Talking about breweries specifically, space-wise, what makes the perfect brewery for you guys? Like, what is a good brewery versus a not good brewery? I'm not talking about the beer at all.
Well, for me, I really appreciate a good, vibe, which I know is like everyone says and it means nothing. But I think that for me, it's like, if it's a genuine atmosphere with a lot of nice people and like quality, like bartenders who are sort of knowledgeable about what they're giving you, like at Mad Tree, I think that's awesome. I've been to a couple of places where it almost feels like a bar, where the live music is so loud that you can't hear each other. Mm-hmm. And, I'm 30 years old. I kind of just like at this point, I know what I want. And what I want is to have a conversation with the beer and not a screaming match with the person or people that I'm going to the bar with. So for me, I think it's a little bit of everything from the environment that really makes the difference between service, atmosphere, and then, of course, food is also something that I've really started paying attention to. We were talking with Crooked Handle about how important food is and how in Columbus, when I was living in Mansfield, it seemed like a lot of these breweries had a lot of food trucks. But now in Cincinnati, at least, and in Dayton as well, it's mostly in-house food, shifting, which is a completely different thing because you can sort of show up knowing that you're going to be able to eat as opposed to hoping that you're going to be able to eat, which I think is a really, really good transition.
Well, to me, there's very few things that I despise more. Despise is a rough way to put it, but if I walk into a brewery and they've got a food truck, which great, I love it, love having a food truck. I love food trucks.
Right, because food trucks are cool.
But let's assume that the food truck is serving food that I don't like.
Right.
what do I do?
Right.
So now, like, you can't order food because there's a food truck. You're not going to bring your own food into a place that has a food truck. That's, if anybody doesn't know, that's wrong. Don't do that. But I don't want to eat the food truck. And I didn't know that before I came there. Like, now I'm stuck in this position where it's like, okay, I'm not going to eat, and then we're going to have to go somewhere else after this. And like that, you don't want your customer to be left with that feeling when they might have loved your beer and loved the vibe of the place and all these other things. But now that's what they're left with is, man, I was just hungry.
or you get there, you find out the food truck you were looking for didn't show up.
It didn't show up or left early or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Jason was saying on the Crooked Handle podcast. He was basically saying that they found that people will leave and they will lose a lot of money during the dinner hours because no one else is there.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons why he decided that it was a good idea to have in-house food to sort of capture those dinner eaters as well as the people who just come in randomly. So it is interesting, I think. I don't know if Seventh Son is it's a brewery in Columbus that always had food trucks. I don't know what they'll change the way they were doing it or what. I haven't been there in years, so I shouldn't have used them as my starting point. But nonetheless, I mean, it will be interesting in seeing how food trucks even survive that sort of market share as they sort of realize the issue.
Well, I mean, we're starting to see a lot of like food truck parks pop up too, where it's a place where you're going there for food trucks. Mm-hmm. Locally here, we're not seeing any of those with a brewery concept attached to them yet, and I think that could be a fun thing where like you know that this is food trucks. It's all about food trucks, but there's going to be more than one. So I know that there's going to be something that I can eat and something that I'm going to enjoy. So I can go to the brewery, and then there's going to be 3, 4, 5, however many food trucks that I have to choose from. I think that's a really, really fun idea. But can that make sense for those food trucks themselves on a Wednesday night? I don't know.
Yeah, there's probably too much competition for a weekday, but perhaps at like a festival or like a music event or like.
But as far as something that you can wrap in with a brewery, like a real like a concept where like you're
or like
going
at
to
an
this
anniversary
place
party or something for sure
for food trucks.
Yeah,
it's I don't know. I love food trucks, but sometimes it's hard. What about you, Blake? As far as the perfect brewery, the perfect tap room, the perfect space, beer side,
the closeness feeling, and also some places, even if they're not close, like Matt Tree or Ryan Guys, when you walk in, your eyes drop, and you're watching a Bengals game. Like one of my favorite places to go watch a Bengals game live is Ryan Guys. Definitely, especially through the playoffs, that vibe is something out of this world.
When they've got that whole the little sports deck thing that they built at Ryan Guys now. Yeah. It's a really cool place to sit and watch something.
I think it's not hard for me. It's very. I guess that's a. I don't know how to word this, but how it's hard for me to pick apart a brewery. So I mean, just because I can find goodness in about everything.
Have you walked in a place, and I'm not saying to name somebody, but have you walked in a place and be like, yeah, I just don't like it? Like, has that happened?
Once in a while, but it don't happen often.
What was it about those places that
it just felt like a close knit community, and it wasn't very welcoming to a new person, but that does not happen often.
Right,
There's probably somewhere up north, I can't remember the name, but
sounds like something that would happen up north.
those Yankees.
But I get that. Like I've definitely been to those places where you walk in and everybody kind of looks at you and like, oh, this is gonna be one of those times. Which can be fun sometimes, but
Which I think I love most about like Cincinnati Breweries is that you don't get that feeling much at all when you go there.
No, I can't think of any places off the top of my head right now where you
or
would
even
get that
Dayton
experience. I don't have enough experience up here in Dayton to.
We went to a place. Blake and I and Eric went to a place shortly after the new year had begun, and I think it was in Kentucky somewhere. I can't remember what the name of it was. Well, I was not going to tell you what the name of it was. But we walked in, and to their credit, they had like their entire bar seats filled, but that was pretty much it, and it was pretty empty. And for there, I felt like when you were talking about like a weird vibe, that was one that sort of came to mind. And I'm not saying that the beer was bad or was fantastic, but for me, it was a little strange. Even though I was already with a group of people, it just wasn't really like, quote unquote, happening.
Right. It feels off to you when you walk in, just like
Sorry about that.
Right. That's all right. It's easy.
We'll just put a big bleep and imagine that you're cursing the entire time.
You won't even hear it.
Okay.
What about a place that you walk into and if you could, I'm going to try to find a way to word this better, because if you could pick like 3 or 4 components of great tap rooms or great breweries, again, beer aside, because I think that's kind of the easy way out of it. And you could kind of combine them together. And you can be specific on this and call out specific places and kind of build the perfect brewery experience. What would that be?
The first one that comes off to my mind is 50 West. Like when you go to
what part specifically?
Like the volleyball courts and the bird, like it's like an old like diner on the other side there. You just pick up burgers and fries, and just the vibe is always cool.
Yeah.
I definitely think food has become like a big thing, that you want the food good and the atmosphere and things going on, or if you're near an area that draws you in too, I think helps as well.
Yeah, I mean, as a non-brewery owner, I think the most exciting thing for a new brewery goer or even a regular is user experience, right? So I think you naming 50 West is a great example, because they have pickleball courts, they have sand volleyball, they have fantastic burgers and fries, and their beer is good. And I think that it's really important when people do those sorts of things. I think it's important to have different sort of things for everyone who goes, sort of like think about what everyone would enjoy, whether it's having a music venue for people like me who love like real live music, or having a good food. I mean, like, food can be pretty much anything. You can have a taco place or a pizza place, or even, it's like sandwiches or French fries. I mean, anything goes. Chili goes with beer, right? So I think that whenever you walk into a place and you immediately think that there's like something there for you, that's really, really important. For me, I lived in Mansfield for several years, and I lived with I always called it a neighborhood bar, because it was like right up the street from where I could go, so I would be able to walk there, and more importantly, walk back. And
so underrated.
Yes, for sure. And it was sort of like it was a really small town bar, if you will. It was called the Fox, and I love it dearly. I even have a dollar with my name up on the roof of it, or on the ceiling of it. And one thing that I really liked about that was that I pretty much knew either everyone's name or everyone's face, and so that's something that you can't really predict as a new person, but that's the sort of atmosphere that you really become familiar with. So comfort. I think for sure. So I think, being able to come up with some sort of comfortability factor or familiarity factor for people is really important. And it's not necessarily having like a futon, although, potentially a nice touch.
Going off of that too, like the bar I took you to after Crook Handle Mojo's, how the bartenders just know you. That's something too that,
yeah,
it's a good feeling. It's almost like a Cheers moment, but
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why it was in Cheers, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. It makes you feel like you belong.
Mm-hmm. And I get that feeling when I go to Alamatic all the time. Like, they know who I am.
Right.
It's just a great feeling.
So I've been telling you to leave beer out of all of the things. Let's talk about beer specifically. What styles do you guys tend to lean towards? What do you love about them? What kind of beers do you guys love?
I try to be
that probably shifts and changes, but right now,
I try to be as open-minded as I possibly can. I guess I can lean on IPAs a lot, especially like during the summer.
Yeah.
But like when the winter comes around, it's Oktoberfest, heavy beer, and once in a while I'll get IPA, or like when you go to Urban Artifact, that's when fruit tarts, sours, and.
Do you like big bold flavors? Is that kind of always?
But there's nothing wrong with a light beer once in a while too, especially like after mowing the yard or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm a big fan of sour beer. So Urban Artifact has my heart. Mad Tree has my blessing. Ryan showed us or introduced me to what he calls the legendary lager, which was one of their most metalled beers, and it was very good. So that's a light beer that I really, really enjoy. I'm also a big Hefeweizen fan, as you might have been able to tell from my Toxic Brew order. But I also try and keep an open opinion because, while I'm 30 years old, I've not tried every beer in the world. And so even last week, Crooked gave me a IPA, and I normally don't like IPAs, but I really liked a West Coast IPA from him.
Well, it's funny how some of that changes too. Like even from like day to day, like there'll be one day where I don't like IPAs, but today it just tastes really good, and then tomorrow it doesn't again. Like it's just
right.
like it's so like fleeting sometimes within experiences and within moods and depending on what you ate, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes into it. But again, it just goes to that not limiting yourself. On that note, what are things that you just don't like? Are there any beer styles that you just, beer or drink styles that you're like, you know what? It's like you talked about seltzers.
Yeah, I mean, I've dated so many women who just want me to order a seltzer or like a White Claw, and I always have to sort of like clench my something when I order it because I'm slightly embarrassed. But I also just think that they're not good. I'm also not a huge fan of cider beer. I think it's a great attempt, and my mom is not gluten friendly, so she isn't a big beer drinker, but if she were, like, it's nice to know that there's an option for her.
Sure.
But it's not really for me. I've pretty much always just sort of stuck with beer because I guess I don't venture out as much as I should.
Is there?
I guess I should say domestic light beers are something I can't. I've tried so many different ones. I think craft ruined that because of the flavoring. Even though craft light just somewhat tastes different. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a mindset, but
there's probably a lot to that.
But yeah, I would just say like domestic light or a lot. I just don't go down well.
Right, I get it. Is there anything you guys want people to know about you guys or about the podcast or anything that you think that they don't know?
That we love trying new places, we love talking to new people, and we just want that people to give us a chance. And I think the four we've talked to, we've had a great time with all of them, and we're only going to get better. And our confidence level and our questions are going to keep getting better and stronger. And I feel like we're just tipping the iceberg on what we can do.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with you, Blake. I think the number one thing to keep remembering is that we're doing this as sort of an educational-ish entertainment. What is that edutainment piece for listeners or anyone who loves beer or is new to beer? I think that Blake personally does a really great job of finding really awesome people to speak with, and he asks pretty provoking questions. And then, I've never listened to a podcast that we've done while editing and think like, oh, we shouldn't have done this or we shouldn't have done that, because I just, I keep an open mind.
I've definitely had those moments, and it comes up. You will hit those moments.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely will. But I guess my point is that like, I think that we do a really great job, and I think that we are. We're having a lot of fun, and we just sort of want to help increase the number of craft drinkers in the world.
Right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. How can people find the show?
We're on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google.
Yeah, the podcast is called Blake the Brewer Explorer, and you can find him at the same name on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and anything else? YouTube.
A little more Twitter.
More Twitter.
I don't use it as much as I.
I think that's a trending thing. I think a lot of people are using it less and less.
Yeah. Thanks, Elon.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you sitting down, and we'll be back next week. If you guys don't already subscribe to Blake the Brewer Explorer podcast, go subscribe right now. Like wherever you're listening to this, you can go and just subscribe because some really, really fun guests and a neat perspective on kind of what they're doing. Share it with your friends. Like that's how these things keep growing. Share this show with your friends. If you want to support monetarily, go to thenarlynome.com/support. You can do it that way. It's Cincy Brewcast. It's the voice of Cincy Craft.